All across Team Blue, the team's been working tirelessly to ready this New Glenn mission for flight. Want to discuss our objectives? Absolutely, our #1 objective is to deliver ESCAPADE safely and successfully on its way to L2 and then eventually onto Mars. We also are wanting to land our booster. If we don't land the booster, that's okay. We have several more vehicles in production.
The data that ESCAPADE will gather around Mars, along with knowledge that we have from prior missions, will enable us to better understand the space weather environment of Mars, so how the upper atmosphere of Mars responds to changes in space weather, so-called solar storms, which can belch out 1 billion tons of gas at 3 million miles per hour, and how the Martian atmosphere responds to that.
So ESCAPADE represents basically doing science at a order of magnitude lower than previous. We're doing it for, less than 80 million per spacecraft and launch, which is huge.
Really excited to see that mission go forward. Really excited to see, heliophysics' first mission to Mars, and being able to deliver that space weather information that will hopefully help as humanity expands out into the cosmos.
And welcome everyone to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. The launch of Blue Origin's second New Glenn rocket to date. The mission NG-2, carrying aboard, of course, NASA's ESCAPADE satellites and a communications demonstration for Viasat. My name is Will Robinson Smith. I'm a reporter with Spaceflight Now. It's good to be with you here on this Sunday morning. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. But as you can see with the imagery we're bringing to you right now, we've got cameras positioned across Florida's Space Coast to bring you the best possible views of Blue Origin and their New Glenn rocket as they're targeting a liftoff currently at 2:45 p.m. Eastern, 1945 UTC for those of you joining around the world. As we're getting things rolling here, I want to thank the more than 1,000 of you who are joining us at the top of the broadcast. We've got about T-minus 1 hour, 56 minutes remaining before this rocket is set to take flight, assuming a liftoff at the earliest possible opportunity at the opening of today's launch window. Certainly a team sport when covering big launches like this, so I want to thank all the folks that are involved. We've got, of course, our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, who's running the technical operations of the broadcast today. Our photographers, John Pisani, Adam Bernstein, are both in various positions near and around and south of the pad. We're also joined in tracking views currently by our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. This camera view you can see here. We'll also be joined a little bit later in the broadcast by our friend Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions. As the clock is currently running at T-minus 1 hour, 54 minutes, 40 seconds. At this point in the count, Blue Origin has completed tanking its New Glenn rocket at Launch Complex 36 and is going through some of the final phases prior to the planned liftoff. One of the big milestones ahead, of course, is continuing to keep tabs on the weather. It's a little bit hard to distinguish from our views looking from the south to the north, so I'm going to go ahead and bring in a camera view from here at the Kennedy Space Center, looking at Launch Complex 39A, where you can see some clouds that have been rolling across the spaceport here, moving from the north to the south, pulling out a little bit wider so you can see the countdown clock and the flag by the electronic clock, which at this moment is currently off. You can see those clouds that have built up and around and are moving throughout the area. For the better part of an hour, oh, look, we've got a, actually, let's bring that shot back up, Stephen. We've got a countdown clock up here on the countdown board that is just activated. A nice view of the mission patches designed by Blue Origin. These teams are running towards that launch opportunity coming up here. And as you can see, just under 2 hours. John Pisani pulling out to a much wider shot to give you a good vantage point on the clouds here today. One more bit of context for this, if we go now to the Goes East satellite looking down on the Florida Peninsula, you can see quite a bit of activity streaming across central Florida. Heading into this launch opportunity, the 45th Weather Squadron did forecast about a 45% chance for favorable weather during this launch window if Blue is able to launch today. The forecast shows a 65% at the beginning of the window. It slides down to 55% as the clock rolls on in this launch opportunity. Meteorologists tracking potential interference by cumulus clouds, the surface electric fields rule, as well as anvil clouds in the area. This as a front is coming in, bringing potentially some showers and thunderstorms out ahead of that. Meteorologists categorize it as, quote, a few strong to severe storms may develop Sunday afternoon with a small chance of a thunderstorm wind gust near 80 FPS. Launch weather team is also tracking low to moderate risk from solar activity for this mission. Now, if Blue is unable to launch today because of the weather or some other technical issue, a 24-hour backup from a meteorological stance shows a 75% chance for favorable weather, with the primary concern being the liftoff winds on Monday. Same amount of solar activity ranging in the low to moderate bracket. The booster recovery weather today looks good. It's a low risk on a scale of low to moderate to high, but in a 24-hour backup, that bumps up to a moderate risk. And of course, as you can see now by looking, if we can go to the press site camera view, you can see rain is now starting to fall. As I mentioned, those storms ahead of the front, well, here they are. The Kennedy Space Center press site, as well as the surrounding areas, have been in a Phase 1 lightning watch, with some areas being in a Phase 2 lightning warning. Our crews out in the field are, of course, also closely monitoring the weather and will take necessary precautions as needed throughout the course of our broadcast. And obviously, if they need to go inside to seek further shelter, obviously their safety is infinitely more important than their camera views. So we will continue to monitor the weather outlook and act accordingly. Here's a look back at the vehicle assembly building. You can see a bit rainier here versus down in the Jetty Park area where Adam and John are currently situated. Still a pretty nice beach day at this point in time for folks that are right along the jetty. While it's much colder for folks up north here in the United States, one of the benefits of living here in Central Florida is you've got good beach conditions, or at least decent beach conditions, throughout a good majority of the year. Can't see it in the shot, but you got the yellow flag flying, which indicates a moderate surf risk. A red flag would be a high surf risk, and thankfully, when we were doing some of our pre-production here today, I did not see a purple flag, which is always good when you do not see a purple flag, because that suggests dangerous marine life has been spotted in the area. And you don't want to play with a jellyfish. Taking a look at our live chat here, I want to thank our moderator who is helping us out today. I believe we've got Rick Donner here in the chat, which, of course, now that I try to bring it up, is frozen, so bear with me 1 second. You can help follow the rules of the chat and help out Rick and any of the other mods that cruise on in throughout the course of the broadcast. We ask that you post your message in English so that the mods can respond as appropriate. Also, that you hold off from delving into overt politics or religion, and don't use all caps when you type out your message. Emojis are perfectly fine. We just ask that you don't create a huge block of them so it takes up a large percentage of the live chat. And last but certainly not least, we ask that you treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated. We'll all get along swimmingly. Our thanks to one of our channel members, Cumulus Granatus, for being in the chat to help answer folks' questions about this mission as they come up. Speaking of channel members, certainly can't do this and our other live launch opportunities without the ongoing support of our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So thanks to folks like The Rocket Girl, Mel Roberts Herald, Minute Loon, M. Teresa, Sherry, Thomas Myers, and many, many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Speaking of channel members, I want to thank Donna Hayes for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Appreciate that, Donna. Thanks for the generosity. And to our 5 newest gifted members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Donna in the live chat, and we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership beyond the month you were just gifted. Last little bit of housekeeping as we get things rolling this early afternoon, just about 1 o'clock here on the East Coast. If you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings-on in the realm of space or spaceflight, or just want to offer a little bit of support for our big launch coverage today, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature to have your comment or query elevated for a possible discussion. Not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll also be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that, my friends, is always greatly appreciated. Time now T minus 1 hour, 41 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. As we're continuing to monitor the weather situation, want to go out wide to John Pisani's view along the beach. You can see shelf clouds starting to form and make its way across the Florida Peninsula towards the edge of the Space Coast here. Certainly considerably darker outlook than we saw even just about 10 or so minutes ago. Rain continuing to fall here in certain pockets of the press site. Just a look back at the rocket. And just looking out the window, still fairly soggy here across the press lawn as well. We'll, of course, continue to keep an eye on weather conditions throughout the course of the countdown and let you know if this results in a change to the T0 here today. Time now T minus 1 hour, 37 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. For those who are just joining the broadcast, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the NG-2 mission carrying NASA's ESCAPADE payload on board. ESCAPADE stands for Escape and Plasma Acceleration and Dynamics Explorers. These are a pair of twin spacecraft that will first fly out to a loiter orbit in the shape of a kidney bean around Lagrange point 2 before they make a pass by Earth in about 11 months post liftoff and start to make their way out to the red planet. So the launch today is not an immediate trip to head out to Mars, but as mission leaders and designers discussed prior to liftoff, they noted that creating a pathway for this kind of mission will help establish some rationale and lay the groundwork for future Mars missions when, say, as SpaceX intends to do, send a fleet of starships out to the red planet eventually. This will be a good proving ground to demonstrate this type of loiter orbit, so you can have a whole cadre of spacecraft and rockets. Yeah. Here's a little bit of an animated view of what the spacecraft look like as they are in their on-orbit configuration. The twin satellites are named Gold and Blue in honor of the colors of the main institution that provided the instruments on board, which is the University of California, Berkeley. The satellites themselves, though, were manufactured by Rocket Lab at their facilities in Long Beach, California. Last year, we had the opportunity to be part of a small group of media that were able to go inside those Long Beach facilities in California and learn a lot more about the design, manufacturing, and eventual execution of the twin spacecraft Gold and Blue. So want to go to part of that tour here. Sorry, folks, we'll bring up that video here in just a moment. We're working through some weather-related shuffling, so stand by, bear with us for just a moment here. Let's go ahead and roll that tape.
Just a quick stop because you won't be able to see them in the clean room. This is an ESCAPADE tank, so there's 4 of these per spacecraft. That PMD device I showed you is down here at the bottom. This is a 3D printed PLA model. It's a plastic thing. It's just a mock-up for us to test MLI, but that's the shape of it overall. It's actually, I've touched the real ones. This is incredibly heavy compared to
I haven't picked
the real one. The real ones are 6 and a little bit kilos, which is a great achievement for something this size, made of titanium as well. And this feels to me like it's 12. I'm trying to lift it.
Yes. A bit more actually.
The reason I showed you this is because I'll have to have you imagine them as they're covered in MLI now and you won't see them. The concept of a standardized bus is a contentious point in the industry, and even within companies people have different opinions. But as a baseline, each of these has some pretty different capabilities. So the Explorer product line, which would include the mission we sent to the moon on Capstone or ESCAPADE, have a very, very high mass fraction that is fuel. In the case of ESCAPADE, it's almost 70%, which is an enormous number. And that allows you to do a lot of delta V. So if you are the type of mission that needs a lot of delta V, you'll probably go for Explorer. You can probably kind of tell there are two decks, same as on the Varda spacecraft. There's a top deck, which is called the payload deck. On top of the top deck are the instruments. Things on this spacecraft that are closest to you, like the little ball on a stick or the red eyepieces, are those instruments. They came from Berkeley. They built them over there and then shipped them to us when on the underside of that top deck is where we put most of our avionics, software computers, radios, amplifiers, all of those things. Then you've got 4 tanks, and then you've got the bottom deck. And the bottom deck primarily has all of our fluidics, so the valves, the regulators, and all the rest. And then underneath that is an engine, and you can probably see the engine bell sticking out from both of them. Well, you can sticking out from this one, from that one. It's been encompassed in what is going on the spacecraft. So the engine visible is on that one. So that's the overall layout. Many of the components come from Rocket Lab. I mean, we make most of the avionics boxes ourselves. We make the MLI ourselves. The radios are ours. The star trackers are our star trackers. I don't know if solar panels are ours as well. Thank you. And so we, I think Rocket Lab has, in general, done a very good job of deciding two different factors. One is build versus buy, so when it makes sense for us to build versus buy from someone else. And second is when to bring things in-house for vertical integration. Composites is a very good example of this. The fact that we have, the only reason, higher level, many of the requirements came from the launch situation we had. So we're the first Vader mission, which is a rideshare acquisition contract method that NASA came up with, I think 3 years ago. And we were the first spacecraft to go down that line. And the way that is set up is that Vader assesses a bunch of launch vehicles, extracts from that some requirements that are sort of all-encompassing, and then imposes them on the spacecraft. That's the spacecraft view of it. From the launch vehicle side of it, if you're approved under Vader and you're one of the 14 launch vehicles that could be doing it, then you can bid for the contracts when ESCAPADE comes up. And so, getting an all-encompassing set of requirements that covers many, many launch vehicles is actually difficult. It made sense in the context of a low-cost mission that NASA wants to do, but it means that the amount of work we have to do is a little bit bigger than if they have specifically identified a single launch vehicle from the beginning. And the main ones that tend to come up are center of mass and frequency. So you want the center of mass to be as low as possible because you can have a rocket and then your satellite is going to be stuck on the edge of that rocket. It's going to shake about, and the closer that center of mass is to the rocket, the less you're imparting forces onto the rocket, so everybody's happy. The other thing that people care about a lot is the fundamental mode of that satellite. So if the fundamental mode is high enough, then nothing's going to happen. If it's low, then it might interact with the rocket. And so these things need to be high. Those are great constraints, but they're very, very hard to achieve with a spacecraft that is primarily fuel. There's nothing we can do about the fuel. Fuel is going to put the center of mass where the fuel wants to put the center of mass. It's going to have the frequency it wants to have. So it made it pretty difficult to do those things, but we did. One of the ways we do that is by being very, very smart about our composites. All of the load paths in the composites are kind of complicated and go through things such as inserts. The number of inserts we have in these panels are absolutely insane. There's over 120 in one of them, which is a very big panel that's almost just 1 meter by 1 meter. And then the other thing we've done is panel in panel. So it's not unheard of, but panel in panel composites is not something that every company is capable of. So those are the kinds of things we did. Another maybe example of smart decision making is the solar panels. You can see they look weird, they're kind of at an angle. The reason for that is because the payload tries to measure electric and magnetic fields. The solar panel is a fantastic source of electric and magnetic fields that could interrupt the payload. So what the spacecraft cares about is to have the solar panels pointed at the sun. It's a great idea. What the payload cares about is to have the solar panels not generate these fields, which means not be pointing at the sun. And the compromise there would typically be that you put motors on those solar panels so that they turn the way you want to. But those things are incredibly expensive and very difficult to make. And so we found a way to not have them on, which massively reduced our cost, but by making the system a little bit more interesting, which meant having those solar panels at a 40-degree angle compared to the top there. There's a lot of I'm very excited for my satellites for many reasons, but one of the main ones is that we really did, our design ethos is to have uncompromising efficiency. There's really nothing on the satellite that is extraneous or complicated or needed, and we typically push the capabilities of the technical side in order to find some really good synergies. A good example of that is that deck situation. So there are many challenges in the system overall, but once you take composites and make them do the absolute extreme, you end up with a spacecraft that looks like this, which is 2 decks with struts separating them. And that means that your entire load path, everything in the satellite goes through either the decks or those struts in between the decks that carry everything. The tanks that are inside see no loads. Any of the other structures on there see no loads. It's all carried by the decks. The contrast to that, just so you can picture it, is a skinned satellite, which is how many satellites are made, where you basically have a box, right, and you put components on the box. Box is another great way of making things stiff, but at a materially bigger mass cost. Now, things change in the industry and it's evolved, but the typical numbers that you give is a primary structure. So the main structure should be on the order of 20 to 25% of the mass of the spacecraft. When we do it our way, ours is 11%. So, pushing composites to extremes allows us to do that. That's cool. But what I really like about our spacecraft is that we then take that and make it do even more. So once you've decided that you've got 2 decks, you can do something really useful, which is you can put all of the hot stuff on the top deck and all of the cold stuff on the bottom deck. All of our avionics, all of our, which emits power, our batteries, which emit power, amplifiers, which are insanely inefficient and always infuriating and emit a lot of heat, they're all on the top deck. And that top deck is cold biased. We try and keep the top deck cold. The bottom deck has all of the fluidic zones. Those are the kind of things that get cold. So, when you expand the gas, stuff freezes. You definitely don't want propellant freezes in line. So the bottom deck tends to have to stay hot. And having 2 decks makes the thermal system way simpler. In a skin satellite, you can have a hot and a cold component next to each other and have to fight it, etc. In this system, now you've simplified the system as well.
Time now T-minus 1 hour, 23 minutes, 6 seconds and counting. It's a little bit hard to see, but if you look towards the left side of the frame, you can make out that it is raining in the area of Jetty Park where John Pisani is situated. You can see those clouds building in on the left-hand side as well off to the west that have been pushing across the Florida Peninsula. Going out to the GOES East satellite view, you can see a little bit better what I'm talking about with those bands of rain that have been pushing across from closer to the Tampa Bay, St. Pete area over to the Cape here. Not exactly what you'd call a Chamber of Commerce day, and as John is letting us know, describing it as a downpour, in his words, along the beach. So a lot of beachgoers calling it quits for now, heading back to their campers or cars. And of course, John is taking precautions to make sure that both he and the equipment are safe, and will pull away from this shot and go to one of our other options around the Space Coast as needed. This is a view from our friend Pete Carson's with Max Q Productions. Just about an hour, 21 minutes, 17 seconds and counting. Time now T-minus 1 hour, 18 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. For those who are in the area of Central Florida and are hoping to see the rocket with your own eyes, I want to bring in this launch visibility graphic created by Blue Origin to give you a sense of what things are going to be looking like once the rocket does leave the pad. Flies on a slightly southeasterly trajectory. It's set to have the booster land, if all goes well, on the autonomous barge named Jacqueline, named after Blue Origin founder Jeff Bezos' mother. Here's an overview of the flight profile of the mission here today. Main engine cutoff is going to happen at about T+3 minutes and 5 seconds. 4 seconds later, the Glen Stage 1 will separate from Glen Stage 2, the liquid hydrogen-fueled upper stage. And at about T+3 minutes and 17 seconds, the second stage engine, the pair of BE-3Us will ignite to propel the second stage on its way. Fairings will jettison just a little before 4 minutes into this mission. And then, of course, one of the big milestones that Blue was unable to accomplish last time because of the upper stage engines were not able to relight, but on the timeline of events here today, looking for the booster re-entry burn to begin at about T+6 minutes and 48 seconds. That will last a little less than a minute in total, about half a minute or so. And that'll set the course for the start of the landing burn, which will use 3 out of the 7 BE4 engines, the 3 that gimbal. That will go from a 3 to 1 configuration with the booster named Never Tell Me the Odds, aiming for a touchdown at about T plus 9 minutes and 9 seconds. After that, the upper stage will perform one more burn. SECO 1, or second stage engine cutoff, happens nearly 13 minutes into the flight and will reignite 25 minutes post liftoff. It will have a roughly 2-minute burn, and then the 2 ESCAPADE spacecraft are set to be jettisoned at T plus 33 minutes and 18 seconds for the first. That is the spacecraft named Blue, and then Gold, its twin, will separate 30 seconds after that. As I mentioned, there's also a communications demonstration from Viasat on board this mission that will activate about 5 minutes after the separation of Blue and Gold. The upper stage, following some initial checkouts of Viasat's tech demo, eventually will be put into disposal orbit, with the end of the mission set for about 1 hour, 41 minutes, and 54 seconds after liftoff. Here's a look at that landing profile in a graphical form. This is how Blue Origin is hoping that things will go with this and other missions launching from here at the Cape. That you'll have a good landing on Jacqueline, then the booster will be brought back into Port Canaveral. If you've been to Port Canaveral, you'll have undoubtedly noticed some of the newer hardware designed to offload the significantly larger boosters off of the Jacqueline barge and onto the dry land, where the booster will then be rotated into a horizontal position and then refurbished and turned around for future flights. Blue Origin says that it has designed its boosters to perform up to 25 flights each, as currently intended. Here's a look at the engines on both of the booster as well as the upper stage, the BE4s and the BE3Us that I mentioned a little bit earlier in the broadcast, as compared to the average height of an American woman in the center for a size reference. One last graphic for now, comparison. Let's see, fix that. Showing an overview. This is a slightly older overlay on the top of the New Glenn rockets, so not exactly what we see out there at the pad at the moment here. But a fair approximation just to give you a sense of where the various tanks are in relation to one another. Time now currently T-minus 1 hour, 12 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. As we're closing in on about an hour prior to liftoff, I want to thank the more than 2,200 of you who are watching along with us live today. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. I also want to thank some folks in the chat for their support this afternoon. Thanks to Don Pierce for a $2 super chat. Thank you, Don. Also thanks to Virginia Pruitt joining us once again for the second of our back-to-back launches today with a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Virginia. Also want to welcome in new channel member Pinpin, joining us with membership at the Mission Specialist level. And a thanks to pre-existing channel member Daniel H. for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. So to Pinpin and our new gifted member, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. And if you haven't already, to the person who was gifted membership, Be sure to thank Daniel in the live chat, and we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership beyond the month you were just gifted. The New Glenn rocket, fully integrated, stands at a height of about 98 meters, or 321 feet, compared to the Falcon 9, which is 70 meters. Payload fairings have a diameter of about 23 feet, or 7 meters, so quite cavernous in comparison to some of the other orbital-class rockets that are flying today. The ESCAPADE spacecraft are quite small in comparison to the full flexed ability of the New Glenn payload fairings. We'll see Blue max out some of that space when it flies other types of payloads like Amazon's Project Kuiper, which, as suggested by the launches that we've seen so far of Project Kuiper on board the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket and United Launch Alliance's Atlas V, they will probably fill to the maximum. I believe the most recent numbers is that the New Glenn can carry 61 Kuiper satellites on board. That's compared to ULA's Vulcan rocket, which can carry a maximum of 45. Its Atlas V, which carries 27, and the Falcon 9, which can carry 24. Time now, T-minus 1 hour, 7 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. As you can see, the weather is continuing to, at least visually, appear as though it's deteriorating. Got a few different vantage points on the New Glenn rocket and Launch Complex 36. Right now you're looking from south position, looking up north towards the pad. We pivot out to our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images over on Merritt Island. They've got a vantage point here looking, they are to the west of the rocket, looking back east. And for those of you who are just joining us or joined us after we talked a little bit more deliberately about the weather, heading into this launch opportunity, the 45th Weather Squadron forecast a 65% chance for favorable conditions at the opening of the window of 2:45 p.m. Eastern. That slides down to 55% outlook at the back end. And as we have seen and are seeing right now, those cumulus clouds and anvil clouds potentially may play spoiler or alter the T0 liftoff time of today's mission. The launch window today runs from 2:45 p.m. Eastern to 4:13 p.m. That's 1945 to 2113 UTC for our friends around the world. Taking a quick peek at our live chat, want to thank Chuck Briggs for gifting 20 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Chuck. To our 20 newest gifted members, welcome aboard. I'm glad to have you all with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Chuck in the live chat, and we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership beyond the month you were just gifted. As we're approaching the top of the hour here at T-minus 1 hour, 4 minutes, 20 seconds, the top of the hour relative to the opening of the window, that is, want to talk a little bit more about the mission of ESCAPADE. Some of the context for this is the ESCAPADE satellites were originally set to be a part of the first launch of a New Glenn rocket. However, while that mission was originally targeting a liftoff back in the October timeframe of 2024, New Glenn was not going to be ready in order to support a mission in that time frame, and so the decision was made to demanifest the ESCAPADE satellites and look at an alternate plan for this mission. Originally, as architected, these satellites would have been sent on a more direct route to the Red Planet, but given the nearly year-long gap of time between their original launch target and where we are now, they had to add that loiter capability to the mission profile, which was designed by the company Advanced Space. So in the run-up to the mission, we had the opportunity to hear from the primary investigator of the ESCAPADE mission and learn more from Rob Lillis of UC Berkeley about what they're wanting to learn with the ESCAPADE mission, why there are 2 satellites on board, and having those 2 spacecraft at Mars is so crucial for this type of operation, and C, the benefit potentially of creating this alternate backup plan that could have some unintended silver linings for future Mars exploration. So again, this is Rob Lillis, the ESCAPADE principal investigator.
We're also excited because ESCAPADE is pursuing a very unusual trajectory in getting to Mars. We're launching outside the typical home and transfer windows, which occurs every 25 or 26 months. And so we are using a very flexible mission design approach where we go into a loiter orbit around Earth in order to sort of wait until Earth and Mars are lined up correctly in November of next year to go to Mars. And this is an exciting and flexible way to get to Mars, because in future, if we'd like to send hundreds of spacecraft to Mars at once, it'd be difficult to do that from just the launch pads we have on Earth within that month, but we could potentially queue up spacecraft using the approach that ESCAPADE is pioneering. That's exciting. But I'm also very excited for the science. That's why I got into this game. That's why we proposed ESCAPADE, because we really, really want to understand the interaction of the solar wind with Mars better than we do now. We know that atmospheric escape from Mars is a major driver for the evolution of the Martian climate. We know that Mars at least was episodically warm and wet for a couple billion years, but hasn't been so for about 2 billion years or so. And we think atmospheric escape is a major reason for that. And ESCAPADE is going to bring an unprecedented stereo viewpoint, because we're going to have 2 spacecraft at the same time. And that's important because when you only have a single orbiter, you can think of that orbiter as kind of like a weather buoy. You have to be in the place where the conditions need to be monitored. If you only have one spacecraft, you can either measure what the sun is throwing at Mars, the so-called space weather environment upstream of Mars, or you can measure the conditions close to Mars in its upper atmosphere where the atmosphere is escaping. But you can't be in 2 places at once. But we can, because we have 2 spacecraft to do this. So we can really get that cause and effect at the same time. We've never had that before, and that's really exciting. And the last reason why it's also very relevant, we think, this kind of science at Mars, is because we need to understand the space weather environment at Mars in order to better forecast space weather conditions that can cause hazards for future robotic and human explorers, both in terms of the radiation environment that happens when you get a coronal mass ejection or other interplanetary shocks, or the distortions to radio signals as they pass through the ionosphere of Mars. If we understand the variability of the ionosphere better, we can help future explorers to both communicate and also navigate better on the surface. So we're really excited.
Time now T-minus 53 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. If you're just now joining us, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the NG-2 mission, the second flight of a New Glenn rocket carrying NASA's ESCAPADE payload on board, in addition to a Viasat communications demonstration. I want to thank the more than 2,700 of you who are watching along with us live today. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream to allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Time now T-minus 50 minutes, 7 seconds and counting. We mentioned in our coverage of the first launch attempt for the Viasat 3 F2 spacecraft that we had the opportunity to head up to my old reporting stomping grounds last week, or yes, that was last week. Gosh, all the days are... No, that was earlier this week, my goodness. Back on Monday and Tuesday, had the opportunity to stop by the Rocket City. We'll have more on that reporting trip in full, potentially as soon as next week. We're going through the writing and editing process for that. But while we were in town, wanted to make sure, had the opportunity to stop by one of the spots that has great relevance for us here in Florida, especially with missions like this with New Glenn. This is Blue Origin's rocket engine factory here in Huntsville, nicknamed the Rocket City, where they manufacture the BE-4 and the BE-3U and the BE-7 engines. Of course, there are 7 BE-4s that power the first stage of the New Glenn rocket, and a pair of BE-3Us on Glenn Stage 2. Unfortunately, didn't have the opportunity to take a spin inside the engine factory. Hopefully we can coordinate that at some point in the future. Of course, we're along the coastline, so we get plenty of avian activity. Nice view here from, I believe this is Adam Bernstein's perspective there at Jetty Park. One bit of good news as far as the weather is concerned is that the Phase 2 lightning warning has been terminated for all the areas it was impacting. I believe the Phase 1 lightning watch is still in play. There's a cameo by our Adam Bernstein, making a crossover into John's part of Jetty Park. Time now, T-minus 45 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. Before we go ahead and start to get some pad level views and other views of the rocket from Blue Origin, let's go ahead and take a look at the mission animation that teams created. Again, this is an overview of what the launch will look like through the separation of the ESCAPADE spacecraft on board. Following a liftoff at T0, the New Glenn rocket set to pass through max Q at about T+1 minute and 35 seconds. Again, this is just an animation, of course, of what the mission will look like. As the rocket passes through max Q and throttles back up, stage separation set to happen at T+3 minutes and 9 seconds. Those fairings will jettison just before 4 minutes into the flight. Fast forwarding quite a bit through the two coast phases, the ESCAPADE spacecraft are set to separate actually 30 seconds apart, beginning at about T+33 minutes and 18 seconds. They will then head into that kidney bean-shaped loiter orbit around Lagrange point 2. One of the other big milestones for Blue Origin, of course, is to recover the first stage booster named Never Tell Me the Odds. Following that reentry burn at T+6 minutes and 48 seconds, there will be the start of the landing burn, which will use 3 engines going down to the one center BE4 engine before touching down on the vessel named Jacqueline, which you see here represented in animated form. Once safely down on the barge, that little robotic assistant will help to safe the vehicle before crew is able to come aboard and they tug it back to Port Canaveral. It takes about 4 days to bring the barge back to port once the vehicle has been safed. Time now T-minus 41 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. As you can see, we're now getting video from Blue Origin from their broadcast. We'll be popping in and out of this periodically to give you some of the closer up views of the launch vehicle, especially as we get closer to liftoff. As they were panning down the rocket, you may have noticed those pivotable grid fins. For a size comparison, they're roughly the length of 16 feet at the base and about 6.5 feet sticking out from the body of the rocket. Looking down near the engine section where the landing legs are also positioned. And of course, this is a NASA mission, so you've got the agency's meatball logo emblazoned on the payload fairing just above the ESCAPADE mission logo, as designed by the folks over at UC Berkeley. Time now T-minus 39 minutes, 27 seconds in the countdown. As we're looking down, or now at the rocket, the vantage point that we saw earlier gave us a good look down at the water deluge system, which will activate about 30 seconds prior to liftoff. Some of the notable milestones that are still ahead of us here with about 38.5 minutes on the clock. half an hour before the planned liftoff at 2:45 p.m. Eastern, 1945 UTC. There will be one more weather check, which, as we've been talking about throughout the course of the broadcast, is something that teams are undoubtedly watching very closely. And at T-minus 17 minutes will be the go-no-go poll for terminal count. Coming back to the countdown, the remaining milestones after the go-no-go poll heading into terminal count. The terminal count will pick up at T-minus 4 minutes. The tanks will pressurize at T-minus 2 minutes and 30 seconds. A minute after that, the vehicle will pivot to internal power. As I mentioned, the water deluge system will activate at T-minus 30 seconds. And the automated sequence will also initiate at that point. Engine ignition is set for T-minus 5.6 seconds. And if all goes well, then at T0 we'll see the second flight of a New Glenn rocket. So just about 6.5 minutes away from the next milestone check-in on the weather to see if it's acceptable for liftoff today, at least at the top of the window. As mentioned, this launch window for Blue Origin spans from 2:45 p.m. to 4:13 p.m. Eastern, 1945 to 21:13 UTC. Time now currently T-minus 31 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. We should be getting a weather update on the outlook for a liftoff at 2:45 coming up here in the next about minute and a half. There's a live look now out at the Jacqueline barge where the booster is set to touch down on. Fairly calm conditions out where Jacqueline is situated. Jacqueline positioned about 375 miles slightly to the southeast of Cape Canaveral, where the rocket's set to depart in just a little more than half an hour from now. As we're hoping to get an update on the weather here in a roughly 30-second time frame. Some bluish looking skies over the pad at the moment, but if we take a peek back here at the press site, back to nearly washout conditions here. Can still make out the countdown clock, but things are a little sloppy out here. We've got our cameras protected from the rain since the launch was coming ahead of a cold front, and I think we had a good production meeting to make sure that we got everything wrapped and taken care of, and our photographers, Adam and John, out in the field are taking steps to make sure that the cameras are protected as rain moves in and out in their area. Less than 30 seconds on the clock now. Teams may be getting a weather briefing behind the scenes. We're listening into Blue Origin's broadcast as well. Actually, let's go to this shot here. A really nice view of the 7 BE-4 engines that power the New Glenn first stage. This appears to be a look at the engine bells for the 2 BE-3U engines on the rocket's second stage. Looking down at the pair of engine nozzles and the top of the inner stage. Time now T-minus 24 minutes and counting. Assuming that a weather poll or weather check was conducted, we still haven't heard an update on the weather outlook from the Blue Origin broadcast, so we're hoping to get some information on the latest conditions and if liftoff at the opening of the window is possible from a meteorological standpoint. Taking a quick peek at our live chat, though, I want to thank the nearly 5,000 of you who are watching along with us live today. Here's another live look at the Jacqueline barge where Blue Origin is hoping to land the first stage booster named Never Tell Me the Odds. That landing about 9 minutes post liftoff if all goes well this go around. NASA's head of the Science Mission Directorate has just popped into the Blue Origin broadcast. So let's go ahead and listen into her remarks here.
Getting ready to protect our crews when they go to Mars. Super excited about Artemis 2 next year, launching to the moon, and then NASA Science, we are eyes on Mars.
Oh, we're all eyes on ESCAPADE and Mars today, aren't we?
Amazing. Isn't this nice that I believe your background is in heliophysics? How do you feel about going to Mars? Like we're mixing it up in the solar system for you.
Well, I will tell you, for heliophysics, the moment you leave the Earth's atmosphere, you're traveling in my neighborhood.
That's fair.
Right?
Touche.
Heliophysics goes all the way from the center of the sun to the very outer edge of our solar system. So I actually was one of the, I got to select this mission, so could not be more excited to be here with my amazing heliophysics team getting ready to launch this mission.
And especially given the advanced space has made this extraordinary trajectory
Right.
that the two spacecraft are going to fly around L2, but also
For
again
the first
in your
time
neighborhood.
ever.
First time ever, and it actually unlocks a lot of possibilities for us thinking about Mars going forward, because now maybe we're not stuck with these Mars launch windows.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's just it's such a fantastic day.
Cool.
And really briefly, can you explain that for our viewers? Because what we're doing is we're kind of doing it in the middle period where we normally wouldn't send something to Mars, but we're going to sit it and let it wait. So explain that.
We are. So we don't have to wait another basically 13 months for Mars to get exactly in the right place and then launch. We are launching the mission. It's going to basically hang out and then wait for Mars to come into the right location and then accelerate full speed ahead to Mars. So it's just a really great, yet another mission of firsts. Yeah.
So many great things. Dr. Fox, thank you for taking the time. I'm sorry I had to grab you, but we couldn't pass up this opportunity.
Well, and I just want to thank you guys. I want to thank Blue Origin for their amazing partnership on the New Glenn. I want to thank Rocket Labs for all the work they've done, the amazing team at NASA Goddard, my incredible team at NASA headquarters. We deliver, they crush it every day, delivering for the nation, inspiring the world.
Well, and thank you. It is an honor to fly a NASA payload on New Glenn today. That you trust us with your technology like that, it means a lot. It's first of many to come, we hope.
First of many to come.
Oh, thank you so much,
Thank you,
Dr. Fox. Appreciate
Gotta
it.
get back to the console. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye. Well, with that, I mean, it's so great to.
And just want to note that Blue Origin is in an unplanned hold right now. The clock has been adjusted. And we do have a new T0 for you. Blue Origin has reset the clock. Now currently T-minus 50 minutes, 5 seconds and counting. New T0 is 3:18 p.m. Eastern, 2018 UTC. Quote, to allow for weather to clear for launch. As we talked about earlier in the broadcast and have been talking about through the course of our coverage, weather has been and continues to remain the watch item for today's mission, as teams were looking at a 65% chance of favorable conditions at the opening of the window, which decreased down to 55% as the window went on. The window is set to close now a little less than an hour after the new current T0 of 3:18 p.m. Eastern. 3:18 is the new T0. 4:13 is when the window ends. So still margin for Blue Origin to play with. However, if the L-1 weather forecast from the 45th Weather Squadron continues to bear true for today, the weather at the back end of the window is not as good as things were at the front end. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what this will mean for Blue Origin as far as their launch prospects today. A 24-hour turnaround as far as the weather is concerned, as of the most recent weather information we have from the 45th Weather Squadron, suggests that there's a 75% chance for good weather in a 24-hour backup scenario, with liftoff winds being the primary concern. Also, the offshore landing weather is a moderate risk in a 24-hour backup scenario. Today, the offshore landing weather is a low risk, which you might have been able to gather by looking at those live pictures we were able to bring in from the Jacqueline barge when Blue Origin was sharing those. Time now currently T-minus 46 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. For those of you who are just joining the broadcast, and I see we've got about 5,700 of you with us at this point, welcome in. You're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of Blue Origin's NG-2 mission, carrying NASA's ESCAPADE payload, twin satellites that are going to be heading off to the Red Planet for nearly year-long science mission. ESCAPADE stands for Escape and Plasma Acceleration and Dynamics Explorers. In a nutshell, these two satellites, when they're orbiting Mars, are going to be studying the Red Planet's magnetosphere and learn more about how solar weather, or space weather, things like solar wind, have impacted the magnetosphere and have helped to shape the Martian climate, stripping it of its atmosphere that it once had. You can see some folks are heading off, given the delay in the T0. Thankfully, our photographers, John and Adam, are soldiering on to bring us these good, albeit slightly rainy views of the rocket. We certainly appreciate them being out in the elements for us today. Time now T-minus 41 minutes, 34 seconds and counting. While we may not hear it as we did not the first go around, there should be another weather check-in coming up in about 11 minutes and some change. Teams will reassess how things are looking. Here's a live look at the 7 BE-4 engines that will power the first stage at liftoff. Those of you who are in Central Florida hoping to get a glimpse of the rocket, A, weather permitting a launch, and B, if the clouds don't prevent you from seeing too much, here's the generalized visibility path and the timing of when the rocket should be visible at each of those progressive times and distances. This graphic created by Blue Origin. Here's a look at the engine section of the vehicle with those 6 landing legs that will be deployed just less than a minute before the booster touches down on the Jacqueline barge. Time now T-minus 38 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. Putting some numbers to the New Glenn rocket, the vehicle stands at about 98 meters in height. That's compared to the rocket we see fly most often here in Florida, SpaceX's Falcon 9, which stands at 70 meters tall. The payload fairing for New Glenn is 23 feet or 7 meters in diameter, with a volume of about 458 cubic meters or a little more than 16,000 cubic feet. At liftoff, those 7 BE-4 engines provide a total thrust at sea level of 3.85 million pounds of force. That's roughly 17,000 kilonewtons. Those strakes that you see there, besides the Blue Origin lettering in the box on the left-hand side of your screen, Blue Origin says they're about the size of an F-16 wing and help carry 175,000 pounds of lift when the stage re-enters for landing on Jacqueline.
end of the day, it would have been so worth it.
Time now, T-minus 33 minutes, 4 seconds and counting. We're pulling away from John and Adam's perspective. Conditions are quite rainy there at Port Canaveral in the Jetty Park area. Getting a nice look inside the 7-meter payload fairing right now. Those are the two ESCAPADE spacecraft, blue and gold. These two spacecraft are set to jettison from the New Glenn upper stage about 33 minutes into the mission. And they will separate roughly 30 seconds apart from one another. We're coming up to another weather check-in that Blue Origin will conduct, as we're roughly 2 minutes away from the point at which they would normally conduct that weather observation. Taking a live look again out at the Jacqueline barge, where Blue Origin is hoping it will be able to land its first stage booster, Never Tell Me the Odds, for the first time, roughly 9 minutes after takeoff. We're just about half an hour before that point of takeoff, as things currently stand, watching for any additional updates to the T0, given the weather outlook is going in and out of how clear things look, depending on the vantage point and which direction you're looking. as we're hoping to get an update on the weather, hopefully. Want to thank one of our moderators, Astro Joe, for being with us here in a live chat. Also, thanks to a few folks for your support today. Thanks to Just Martin for being a member with us at the mission specialist level for a full year now. Thank you, Just Martin. Also, thanks to Psychonaut69 for gifting or upgrading their membership to the mission specialist level. Thanks to Astro Joe for gifting a membership, and welcome in to new channel member Neil Honeycutt, joining us with membership at the mission specialist level. Time now, T-minus 24 minutes, 24 seconds and counting. Taking a look, you can see rain falling at the pad. As teams continue to keep a close eye on the weather outlook. just under 20.5 minutes remaining on the clock. Keeping an eye out for any additional adjustments to the T0 due to weather, but as things are continuing to progress, at least for the moment, we are just a handful of minutes away from the go, no, go pull to proceed into the terminal count. It's coming up at T-minus 17 minutes. We're in an unplanned hold once again as teams likely reassessing a new T0. We'll update you with the latest T0 once that is available. Local time just before 3 p.m. Eastern. Again, Blue Origin has a window today that lasts until 4:13 p.m. Eastern. 2113 UTC, so we'll see what the T0 adjustment is. If you're just now joining us, Blue Origin is once again in an unplanned hold. The clock stopped at T-minus 19 minutes and 58 seconds, a little bit ahead of when they were going to need to make the call on heading into a terminal count, which per Blue Origin's timeline happens at T-minus 17 minutes. As you can see in the live box on the right, the clock has not picked up again, so we're still in the hold as teams are likely assessing the weather forecast. We will let you know when a new T0 is established as soon as one is received. As we're awaiting a new T0 to be issued, I want to thank the more than 9,700 of you who are watching along with us live today. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream to allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Also want to thank a few folks in the chat. Thanks to K2 Hat for a $2 super chat, saying many thanks to all who help with Spaceflight Now. And yes, this is very much a team sport covering rocket launches, so I may be the one on the mic at the moment, but there's a wonderful team who make these opportunities possible. So big thanks to our editor, Stephen Young, to our photographers, Adam Bernstein, John Pisani, and Michael Kane, our support crews of Pete Carson's with Max Q Productions, and Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images as well. Thanks to all of our moderators in the chat. Most importantly, though, thanks to you for wherever you're checking us out from. Certainly appreciate your time and attention with these launches. One quick and easy way to support us in what we do, if you haven't already, is click that subscribe button just beneath this video stream here. And when you are watching one of the videos later on, be sure to leave a comment, since that engagement helps support what we do here at the channel and allow us to do more and cool things, like our recent reporting trip up to Huntsville, Alabama. And of course, as we're looking towards big launch coverage next year with the launch of the Artemis 2 mission. We're starting to put some plans in motion for that. So your ongoing support, whether as a channel member or just as a subscriber, is greatly appreciated. Again, we are still in the current unplanned hold from Blue Origin. Clock stopped just a hair after 20 minutes, as you can see in the shot on the right-hand side of your screen. A new T0 has not been announced, but Blue has about a little more than an hour remaining in their launch window today, which closes at 4:13 p.m. Eastern, 21:13 UTC. Worth noting, of course, that for those of you who are not following U.S. politics, and I know our rule about not delving into over politics and religion in the live chat, I will make an exemption for myself here, since this is germane to potentially what will happen if this launch doesn't move forward today. The federal government, as far as funding, and I'm going to way oversimplify things, so just bear with me here. You're still in a broad-speaking federal funding freeze, referred to as a government shutdown. One of the more relevant pieces of that to this launch opportunity is that the current NASA acting administrator, but in his role as the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, announced some impacts and anticipated slowdowns at 40 airports around the country. And in that same emergency order, also mandated that commercial launches will need to take place between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. local time, to where those rockets are taking off. Even though NASA is the customer on this mission, the New Glenn rocket and Blue Origin still considered to be a commercial launch insofar as the emergency order is concerned. During a pre-launch press briefing, Blue Origin official noted that they do have the range reserved for a launch attempt tomorrow. However, in that same conversation, they also noted that teams are working with the Federal Aviation Administration as well as NASA to get an exemption to allow for a launch to happen tomorrow in the event that they are unable to launch today, since the window of opportunity for a launch in a 24-hour backup scenario would not be able to fall between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. As, say, if you've looked at SpaceX's launch page, they've adjusted a number of their upcoming Starlink missions to fall within those windows. That's unfortunately not an option for Blue Origin, so they would need to get an exemption from that rule to move forward with the backup window, which opens at 2:40 p.m. Eastern tomorrow and lasts until 4:06 p.m. Eastern, or 1940 to 2108 UTC. One reason this is a bit of a squishy situation as far as this particular mission, where we would typically see just out-and-out exemption for planetary missions. As we noted earlier in the broadcast, and we'll, if assuming this unplanned hold continues on, we'll go back and revisit this video, especially for those who were not here at that point in time. The two ESCAPADE payloads are not being sent on a direct path to Mars. Rather, once they separate from Glenn Stage 2, they will enter into a trajectory sending them into essentially a loiter around Lagrange Point 2 in an orbit that's shaped a bit like a kidney bean. And they will hang out in that loiter orbit, if you will, until about 11 months post liftoff. And then they will make a flyby of Earth. And at that point, they will make the Mars, or the trans-Mars injection burn, sending them on their way to the red planet. So it's unclear if, given the fact that this is not directly going to Mars, will weigh against Blue Origin with this timing, but given the importance of this mission to NASA, they may be able to work things out as far as granting an exemption for this particular launch. Other missions to watch out for that are coming down the pike that may be impacted. As mentioned, there are a number of Starlink missions on the horizon, as well as the rescheduled launch of the Viasat 3 F2 spacecraft, which is going to be launched to a geosynchronous transfer orbit on a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket. That mission's set to launch from Space Launch Complex 41 here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. There are some hazards, I believe, that have been placed for that mission, but at this point in time, ULA has not formally announced a new launch date for that. Obviously, the ongoing federal shutdown may impact that as well. So we will give you the latest on all of those as they come about. You can always head over to our website anytime, day or night, spaceflightnow.com. Click on the launch schedule tab to keep up to date on what's coming down the orbital pike. Local time 3:18 p.m. Eastern. This was the most recent T0 time for Blue Origin before they entered into this current unplanned hold. Clock still frozen at about T-minus 19 minutes, 58 seconds. We're standing by for a new T0 as Blue Origin has now less than an hour remaining in its launch window today. As we're continuing to wait for this hold to lift, though, for those of you who were not with us when we shared this earlier, want to re-rack and play a little bit of the pre-launch briefing where the mission director, or the primary investigator, I should say, for the ESCAPADE mission, this is Mr. Rob Lillis, talks about the new trajectory for this mission, what they hope to accomplish with the ESCAPADE mission, and why, even though they're not sending the spacecraft on a direct path to Mars, that may in fact not be such a bad thing. So this is ESCAPADE principal investigator Rob Lillis.
We're also excited because ESCAPADE is pursuing a very unusual trajectory in getting to Mars. We're launching outside the typical Hohmann transfer windows, which occurs every 25 or 26 months. And so we are using a very flexible mission design approach where we go into a loiter orbit around Earth in order to sort of wait until Earth and Mars are lined up correctly in November of next year to go to Mars. And this is an exciting and flexible way to get to Mars, because in future, if we'd like to send hundreds of spacecraft to Mars at once, it'd be difficult to do that from just the launch pads we have on Earth within that month, but we could potentially queue up spacecraft using the approach that ESCAPADE is pioneering. That's exciting. But I'm also very excited for the science. That's why I got into this game. That's why we proposed ESCAPADE, because we really, really want to understand the interaction of the solar wind with Mars better than we do now. We know that atmospheric escape from Mars is a major driver for the evolution of the Martian climate. We know that Mars at least was episodically warm and wet for a couple billion years, but hasn't been so for about 2 billion years or so. And we think atmospheric escape is a major reason for that. And ESCAPADE is going to bring an unprecedented stereo viewpoint, because we're going to have two spacecraft at the same time. And that's important because when you only have a single orbiter, you can think of that orbiter as kind of like a weather buoy. You have to be in the place where the conditions need to be monitored. If you only have one spacecraft, you can either measure what the sun is throwing at Mars, the so-called space weather environment upstream of Mars, or you can measure the conditions close to Mars in its upper atmosphere where the atmosphere is escaping. But you can't be in two places at once. But we can, because we have two spacecraft to do this. So we can really get that cause and effect at the same time. We've never had that before, and that's really exciting. And the last reason why it's also very relevant, we think, this kind of science at Mars, is because we need to understand the space weather environment at Mars in order to better forecast space weather conditions that can cause hazards for future robotic and human explorers, both in terms of the radiation environment that happens when you get a coronal mass ejection or other interplanetary shocks, or the distortions to radio signals as they pass through the ionosphere of Mars. If we understand the variability of the ionosphere better, we can help future explorers to both communicate and also navigate better on the surface. So we're really excited.
an FBI.
Local time past the bottom of the hour here, 3:32 Eastern. The unplanned hold is still in effect. Blue Origin commentators noting that it's not just the weather that they're watching, but also apparently an errant boat in the safety zone that also needs to be cleared before teams can proceed. So a couple things working against Blue at this moment in time, but as we go back out to John's wide shot, you can see some pretty nice skies out to the east.
sounds like Will has a wacky idea, so let's try it.
Yeah, so
Time now T-minus 28 minutes, 28 seconds and counting. At this point, Blue Origin reports that the weather is clear. As you can see, the countdown has picked up. However, teams report that they're looking into an issue with their ground support equipment at the pad. Again, while the clock is running, teams are looking into a ground support equipment issue at the pad. Weather has improved, and they're running towards basically the end of the launch window today. Time currently T-minus 26 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. As the clock is back in motion and Blue Origin targeting the end of the window, lots of surprises throughout the course of this countdown, and one more to add to that mix. We are joined live at the beach by our friend Stephen Clark, space reporter with Ars Technica, reporting on scene, joining us live here with less than half an hour to go. Stephen, how are you doing, my friend?
Hey, Will. I'm doing well. Fingers crossed for a launch coming up this afternoon.
Well, so glad you were able to join us with the clock back in motion. It sounds like it's been a challenging afternoon for Blue between the weather, the boats, and now a ground systems issue. Obviously, they weren't able to launch the first go-around with the NG-1 mission. This is to be expected given this is a brand new orbital launch program, right?
I mean, yeah, I think it's to be expected for really most any rocket. You know, the Mother Nature is outside of the control of the launch team and outside of control of engineers. Same thing with the boat, although I think it's been a while since we've had a boat interfere with a launch, but historically that has been known to happen. And of course, ground system issues, you know, those are pretty standard for rocket launches. We just saw United Launch Alliance have, you know, a technical problem prevent their Atlas V from launching a few days ago. And so these things happen. And I think, you know, they're resuming the count. So they're targeting close to the end of the window is my understanding, although you may be more in the loop to the real-time info than me out here on the beach. And so hopefully everything comes together for liftoff of NG2 this afternoon.
Yeah, the window closes at 4:13 p.m. Eastern, and it looks like they're targeting 4:12 and 30 seconds. So basically hitting it right at the buzzer if they're able to launch today. One of the interesting aspects of this mission, of course, is the fact that given that they weren't launching when they intended to back last fall and now are targeting a launch hopefully in the next 24 and a half minutes, performing a launch not directly to Mars but into a loiter orbit. You actually have a piece up right now on your news outlet's website, arstechnica.com. Wonder if you can delve a little bit into the quote-unquote kidney-shaped or kidney bean-shaped transfer orbit that they're going to loiter in for the better part of a year.
Sure will. So launches directly from Earth to Mars are possible about every 26 months. There's usually about 3 weeks to 5 weeks or so of launch opportunities within that period of time every 2+ years. Well, right now we're right in between, roughly halfway in between launch windows. So Mars is actually on the other side of the sun, the other side of the solar system, relatively speaking, about 220 million miles away from Earth. So the positions of the planets don't allow to launch to Mars at this time. So in order to get this mission off the ground when Blue Origin is ready to launch it, the engineers over at Advanced Space, this is a startup mission design team in Colorado that's working with Rocket Lab and UC Berkeley and NASA on the ESCAPADE mission. They came up with this really novel orbit to be able to launch from here at Cape Canaveral out to what's called the L2 Lagrange point, about 1 million miles from Earth. In fact, this is where the James Webb Telescope and a number of other astronomy missions are positioned. And it will fly past that point and actually enter this loosely bound orbit around the L2 and Earth. And it will actually spend about a year, almost exactly 1 year, till November 7th of next year, in this orbit that's shaped like a kidney bean. And on November 7th and 9th, the 2 spacecraft will come back close to Earth, just a few hundred miles above the planet, and that's where they'll perform a maneuver to boost themselves from the Earth out toward Mars. And in fact, this is roughly when the normal interplanetary launch window would be open next November. So it'll take advantage of the orbital dynamics that are enabled by this unique trajectory, this kidney bean trajectory, and will perform that what's called an Oberth maneuver. And in fact, if any of your viewers have seen the movie The Martian, that's very similar to the Rich Purnell maneuver in The Martian, where they come close to the Earth and use the Earth's gravity to help slingshot them out toward Mars.
Always love a good sci-fi reference in any broadcast. When you can work that in, it's a good day. One more question, Stephen, before we let you go, since we're a handful of minutes ahead of when they need to make the call on go, no go for this launch opportunity. This is the second launch of a New Glenn rocket, and obviously teams are targeting a number next year. Various numbers have been reported on, but what are some of the key things from the launch side of this operation that you're really going to be watching for, especially as Blue's got a moonbound mission with its Blue Moon Mark 1, potentially as flight number 3 coming up early next year?
Yeah, I think the big one, of course, is the recovery of the booster, which I know you've talked about there just in your broadcast this afternoon. So Blue Origin is planning to reuse this first stage booster, which is nicknamed Never Tell Me the Odds, for the next launch if everything goes according to plan, and then kind of have roughly a few month timeline to refurbish it, to inspect it and refurbish it and get it ready for Flight 3, which could be in the early part of next year if everything goes perfectly. But that assumes a successful landing and that there's no additional refurbishment or anything unexpected that needs to be done on the vehicle. So they're counting on a few successes that they don't have quite under their belt yet, but they're certainly hopeful they're going to be able to land the booster and get it back to port this week.
Stephen Clark with Ars Technica. You can follow the reporting of him and his colleague over at arstechnica.com. And Stephen is at Stephen Clark1 on X. Thanks for joining us, buddy, and fingers crossed we get a good launch here in about 20 minutes.
Yeah, let's hope so, Will. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And as you just mentioned, we're 20 minutes and some change out from liftoff. In about 3 minutes is the point at which the the Blue Origin launch director should make the call on whether they are go to proceed to the terminal count. Terminal count picks up at T-minus 4 minutes. Time now 18 minutes 39 seconds and counting. A nice rainbow as we've got a Carnival cruise ship by the look of it. Or no, that's I think that might actually be Royal Caribbean heading out of Port Canaveral. Nope, that was correct the first time. It is Carnival. That is the Carnival Vista that is heading out of port right now. So if all is able to go well with Blue and getting that ground system issue cleared, should be some really nice launch views for folks that are either on the right side of the ship or on the top deck. Our thanks again to space reporter for Ars Technica, Stephen Clark, for joining us for thoughts and insight onto the NG2 mission. Just about T-minus 17 minutes on the clock. Again, this is the point at which Blue Origin is set to make the call on whether they are go to head into terminal count.
LVHD retraction, also pending weather. This is the go pull for final configs and terminal count. GC.
GC is go pending retraction of LVHD 10.
LC1.
LC1 is no go pending. They have launched PDI load.
Understand you are a go pending the load. LC2.
LC2 is go.
LSO.
Go.
OSM.
Go with the exception of weather.
RC.
Go.
ESR.
ESR go pending LVHD and PDI.
AC.
Go pending LVHD retraction.
Recovery.
Go.
GLI.
Go.
BMD.
Go.
GC, LC1, LC2. Perform final configurations for terminal count. Report when ready for terminal count gate checks.
LC2 copy.
This is RC and count 1.
GC copy.
Go ahead, RC.
Another potential RC surveillance violation with a cruise ship. We're still working on Coast Guard to make contact. I'll give you an update as soon as I have it.
LD copies.
So
Time now T-minus 7 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. Local time 4:04 p.m. Eastern at 19:04 UTC. Teams are nearing the end of their launch opportunity here. The next big milestone coming up is entering into the terminal count at T-minus 4 minutes. The launch director noted that they were stepping into the go, no go poll, quote, pending GME final configuration with LVHD retraction, pending final configuration, as well as watching the weather. Working to get a little bit more clarification on those two items and bring that information to you as soon as we've got that sussed out. In the meantime, it sounds like there was also the cruise ship that was in the keep out zone that is still being worked to clear. With 5.5 minutes remaining on the clock, Blue Origin launch commentators noting that the weather should clear in time for the planned T0. They are still working to clear the cruise ship. No further update on the ground system issue, though, from the Blue Origin commentators. Standing by for further information on that. In less than a minute, Blue Origin should be entering into their terminal count. So we'll stand by. Let's listen to the mission control audio to see if there's an update on those final determinations. We've entered into another unplanned hold. Clock stopped at T-minus 4 minutes, 33 seconds. Given this was essentially the end of the window, presumably this would mean a scrub for Blue Origin today.
Has it? Hold, I see it. All right, that's it for the day. It's pointless today. It's pointless. 3 rainstorms, maybe 4.
And again, the clock for Blue Origin stopped at T-minus 4 minutes, 33 seconds. Local time is 4:11. The end of Blue Origin's window today is 4:13. A confluence of events have pointed towards things staying put where they are today, given the combination of weather that was believed to be clear enough by the time they reached T0, but was still looking questionable. A cruise ship that was in the keep-out zone that may not have cleared in time. Local time is now 4:12, just about 4:12:30. This was the most recent T0 issued by Blue Origin. Now 4:13, officially the end of today's announced launch window. Blue Origin themselves have not officially called a scrub, but typically a launch provider is not able to launch their rocket outside of their allotted launch window. This window constructed based off of the orbital dynamics of where the ESCAPADE spacecraft will be launched into that loiter orbit that we were discussing with our colleague over at Ars Technica, Stephen Clark. Local time now 4:14, about a minute past the end of the launch window today. Roughly in a minute and a half past the last noted T0. At this point in time, Blue Origin has not made a comment on the launch status, but presumably they have scrubbed. Actually, let's listen into their comments here.
Launch is scrubbed due to weather, specifically the cumulus cloud rule. We're reviewing opportunities for our next launch attempt based on forecasted weather. I know we were all really excited to watch NG2 take to the skies today. We came down to the wire, and then there you have it. But my name is Tabitha Lipkin. This is Ariane Cornell. We're going to keep you guys posted and updated with all the information that we get as it becomes available to us. That will be on our social media. And until then, we look forward to seeing you at our next launch, and stay cool. Rodatum Ferociter.
And it's now official, as you just heard from the Blue Origin commentators, that the NG2 mission has officially scrubbed. Now we're into an interesting situation where Blue Origin will need to get clearance from the Federal Aviation Administration for a 24-hour backup opportunity launch tomorrow, which in pre-launch news briefings, they said that they were working with the FAA and NASA to get a clearance for a backup launch if teams were unable to launch today. As far as the weather, which was the stated reason for today's scrub, meteorologists with the 45th Weather Squadron forecast a 75% chance for, 75% chance for favorable weather in a 24-hour launch opportunity tomorrow. Liftoff winds are the primary concern. Also, the offshore landing weather, where the Jacqueline barge is stationed, is listed as a moderate risk, highlighted on a scale of low to moderate to high. So we'll be watching three items very closely here. Number one, if the ground systems issue is able to be cleared and is no longer a working item. Number two, if the weather cooperates. And number three, if the FAA grants clearance for Blue Origin to proceed with a launch opportunity tomorrow. That window opens at 2:40 p.m. and lasts until 4:08 p.m. Eastern. That is 1940 to 2108 UTC. Want to thank everyone for having been with us. Just a quick thank you to some folks in the live chat for your support. Thanks to some super chats from channel members Yazada, Pete 2.0, K2 Hat, Chuck Close, Janine DC, and Tad Buffington. Appreciate all of your support today. Welcome to new channel members Joan Dwyer, Jerry Hansen, and Nate. Nate joining us at the launch director level. Big thanks to our team around the horn who have put in a lot of long hours and hard work to make this broadcast possible. Thanks to Pete Carstens with Max Cube Productions, to Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. Thanks as well to Adam Bernstein and John Pisani for being real troopers out there in the elements. And to our photographer Michael Kane, who was up in the pre-dawn hours to help photograph the Starlink launch this morning alongside John. Thanks as well to our mods, Astro Joe and Rick Donner, and to Cumulus Granatus for helping to answer folks' questions in the chat. Big thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of this broadcast. Most importantly, though, thanks to you for your time and attention today. We'll be back with live coverage of the New Glenn mission at T-minus 2 hours, whenever Blue Origin has permission and is ready to launch. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.